Hello children, this is Grandpa Joe, and in this video we're going to talk about Papaw's feats of strength, if you can believe that. So I said in other videos that did a lot of work and was getting stronger and stronger, so I figured let's talk about some individuals' moments that describe that. So I mentioned in another video about being 14 years old and picking up my dad's 500-pound backhoe bucket and picking it up and putting it in the back of his pickup truck. Well, that's absolutely true. I did that. There were some other things that sound unbelievable, and I only have a couple people that can actually back up what I'm saying, and one of those is dead. My brother, he could testify to most of this, and the other is my mom. So great grandma Catherine, if she's still alive, you can ask her, and if she remembers who she is, she might be able to tell you. So anyway, like I said, I used to work on these dump trucks for my dad, right? When he had a business with dump trucks. So he had 4 dump trucks, and one of them was this old International, okay? And I mentioned before that it had Dalton-style wheels. And these things were crazy hard to work on, and they were just the most annoying, crappy, dangerous, bad design that could ever be conceived. I don't know how these things were allowed on the road and are still out there. I still see them. I can't believe it. That these things, that the government hasn't forced them to replace these ridiculously unsafe, wheels with something else. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I can remember one time where the front driver's side wheel of the International dump truck had a problem with the brakes or something, and or the bearing. That's what it was. Bearing, and the wheel got so hot from the friction that it fused some of the studs to the wheel of the truck, right? So we're trying to get this wheel off so we can get into where the bearings are, so that we could see what's what and replace them, right? That was the idea anyway. And so we're trying to take these lugs off the front of the truck, right? And these were all, well, not all, but there's 3 of them that were welded. It got so hot that it welded them. And so we're trying to take these things off, and we had and we were, luckily we were at this garage, right? So my dad knew a bunch of different dudes, and so we were by this guy's garage, and he had air tools. So the first thing we did was get the air impact driver, right? So we got out that, and we took off 2 of the lugs. So 2 of them came off, and 3 of them, it didn't matter how hard we tried, these lugs were not coming off. This air impact wrench was not moving these things. And we would wait for the pressure to build up on the air compressor, and figured, okay, well, it's just not enough air moving, we'll let it build up. And as soon as we hear the compressor stop, we'd try to take them off. Wasn't happening. So it's all right. So then we broke out. This guy had a inch drive socket. Like we had one too, but we had left it at the house, right? Because we weren't expecting this to be a problem. We were going to a garage that had an air impact, wrench. So the guy says, well, use this and put a pipe on it. Maybe you can, pry them loose. So we put this thing on there, and we got another 2 of them off, right? With this thing, and the way we had to do it was, we had the ratchet, and then we had a long pipe, like a 4-foot pipe over the end of the ratchet. So that's about a 6-foot lever, basically, right? And so we'd stretch that out, and then my dad would hold on to the side of the dump truck and stand on it and jump up and down. And like I said, he weighed like 230. That's what he said. I guarantee you he weighed 250 or more. And so he would jump up and down on this until he would, be able to, break him loose. So we got 2 more left. Now we only have 1 left, right? And he's jumping up and down on this and jumping up and down on this, and it's just not moving, right? And so we don't know what to do. So I get up on the thing, and we're both jumping up and down on this thing, trying to get it to break loose. And my dad's like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have to end up cutting this thing off. And, I don't really want to cut it off because it's going to make a big mess. And I was like, well, let me try something. I said, let me get up underneath it and push up, because we put all our weight jumping up and down on it. And that wasn't working. So I was like, well, let me get underneath it, get my shoulder underneath it, and I will lift up and see if I can get it loose. And he's like, there's no way, both of us jumping on that thing, there's no way you can do that. And I was like, well, let me try. So he's like, all right. So I put the pipe down, as low as I can get it, and then, lift it up because the pipe's going to bend some, right? And so I squatted down and put it on my shoulder and, grabbed hold with both hands and pulled up. And all of a sudden there was this pow sound, right? This explosion. And the wrench ripped free. And I had snapped that ratchet, had just exploded, right? And he's like, oh crap, we broke this man's tools. So he goes in there to the guy and said, hey, listen, sorry, we broke your ratchet. And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, so my son was pushing on the thing and the ratchet broke. And he goes, how do you break an inch drive ratchet? That thing weighs like 10 pounds. It's like, he said, let me see it. Maybe it's just, cammed over or something. So he sees it and it was in pieces. And he goes, what the hell did you do to this? And he's like, I can't believe that. He said, well, we still have to get that thing off there. And you got anything else? And he goes, well, I'll tell you what. He says, I got an inch drive breakover bar. I said, I'd like to see your son break that, And so we took this inch drive breakover bar. So there's no ratcheting. This is just straight drive, inch drive into the socket, right? And so we're using impact wrench, so it's a 5. It fits the lug perfectly, so it's not going to slip. So we go back out, put the breakover bar, put the pipe on it, and I get up under it again, and I bent that breakover bar like in half before that lug finally slipped free. Right? And so we take that bar back to him, and it's useless. I bent the head of it to the point that, it was about ready to snap. And he's like, what? He's like, what in the hell did you, he's like, well, I'm not going to give you any more dang tools if your boy's going to break them all, And he said, "Did you get the thing off?" And he's like, "Yeah, it finally came off there." And he's like, "Jesus Christ!" He's like, "Hey, what are you feeding that kid?" So pretty freaking strong. So that's, I could, basically push up more weight than me and my father together could exert on this bar. So fairly strong. And then another time is a good example. We were, replacing a seal in that stupid truck, right? So the way that my dad had us do it was the way he had seen the guys do it in the garage, right? Well, in the garage, they have this special jack, right? That they, you roll it underneath the tires, and then you jack it up, and you can pull both sets of the dual, so both wheels, without having to take them off. So basically, all you have to do is pull the axle out, and then you can jack up both of the wheels, and then pull them off, right? The whole assembly. And then you can tilt it up, the way the jack was designed, you could tilt it up and get at the seal and the bearings and the races and all that, and replace it all, right? Made it real simple. Well, still hard, but much easier. Well, he saw the way that they did that, where they took, the whole assembly off, and he decided that I could do the same thing by pouring a little oil on the ground underneath the tires and then pulling on it and sliding it out. Okay? And that's the way he wanted me to do that. And it's like, well, instead of taking the lugs off and taking each tire off and then taking the hub assembly off, and then, which would be, easier to do, he wanted to take the full assembly off in one shot like they did in the garage. And it's like, okay. So basically he said, now get a piece of cardboard and put it down, and then pour some oil on top of it, and then you can slide those off, no problem. Now, he had never done this before himself, okay? He had never seen anybody else do this before, but this was his idea, right? And so, of course, he tells me all this and then leaves. As he always did. Because he doesn't want to be there and do the work. If he sticks around, he would look bad sitting over there on his ass while I do everything. So I got to go check on the trucks. Then so he'll leave, right? And so it was me and my brother. And of course, he couldn't do anything. So he was just, sitting behind me, right, in the shade. But he was about, 10 feet away, right, behind me. Kind of, 10 feet away, and then over to my left, right? So anyway, I drive this axle out. And the way you have to do that is you take, they're held in by a bunch of bolts. And so I take these, actually nuts. The bolts are in the spindle. Anyway, so I loosen up these bolts and then get out the trusty Go Devil, right? Because God knows you can't spend an extra, $30 on a sledgehammer. You have to just use what you got. And so I'm pounding away at this axle. The way you do it is you loosen up the nuts on it, and then you smack the axle right in the center, and it'll pop loose, right? Hopefully. So this one's not popping loose. It's under a bind, right? Because of the way the truck's sitting. And so I'm pounding and pounding and pounding on this thing. And after about, 15 tries, it finally breaks free. And so I'm already getting wore out. And I, pull the axle off, right? And I, pour the frickin' thing down on the cardboard. And I, wrestle this assembly off, right? And as I'm pulling it off, I'm realizing this is not going to work, okay? Because I have to put that seal on the back of this thing, and when I put it back on the truck, I can't smash that seal against the spindle that it goes over, right? So if I'm off like a quarter of an inch, I've destroyed the seal and I have to start all over again, right? And I won't know the seal's broken until somebody drives it down the road. So now I'm going to have to do this on the side of the effing road somewhere, or have the dang thing towed back to the lot, right? So this is becoming a nightmare, right? So they're like, great. So I pull the wheel assembly off, and I, pry out the seal and the races and the bearings, and I go through all that, putting all that in, and basically you put a bunch of gear grease and you push it into these bearings, and you have to, use a chisel, which we didn't, or a special tool to pull the race out. Well, we didn't have any special tools. So I hammered this thing out with a screwdriver and my ball peen hammer. So my long screwdriver, my ball peen hammer, I'm knocking out these races, and I get everything cleared, put everything back in, and now I have to put this thing, these duals back onto this spindle, right? So this is both tires, both rims, and the whole the drum, the brake drum, and the hub assembly, all together. So all that weighs about close to 700 pounds, okay? So each wheel, each tire itself weighs over 100 pounds. So there's over 200 pounds with the tires there. And then the rim and the the ring that puts them back on, that's another 100 pounds or more. So there's 300 pounds just in the tires. And then there's the drum and the hub assembly, right? Which that's like 300 pounds. It's a giant chunk of steel, basically. And then plus the bearings and the races and all that crap, all those all together, these are giant metal parts. So it's got to be at the very least 600 pounds. Okay, I'm gonna say be what do you call it, conservative, and say it was 600 pounds, right? And so I'm trying to push this thing on, and I push it on, and I try to look to see if it's lined up, and then I take my bottle jack and I try to jack it up and down. Well, see, this thing is setting at an angle, right? The truck is sitting at an angle from the wheel assembly, and so it won't line up, okay? And the only way that I can get this thing on there is if I, reposition the tires, tilt them at an angle and slide them on. Well, that requires that I, pick this thing up, right? So I grab a hold, like wrap my arms around the tire assembly, and I pull it back on myself a little bit, right? And then try to scooch forward. It's a nightmare to put this thing on, and it's not going on. And I don't want to push too hard, because then, I'm going to ruin the seal. And so I'm trying to tilt this thing back and, get it on there, and it's not working, and it's not working. And it's like getting madder and madder and more frustrated. And finally, I just start shaking, And my brother knows when Joe starts shaking, it's time to get the F out of there, because that means that Joe's body is being filled up with adrenaline, and shit's about to go south. And sure enough, I just snapped, and I grabbed the whole assembly. Okay? I pulled that thing off the spindle and picked it up and threw it over my shoulder, right? Without thinking that, hey, just behind me. Oh no. And so I throw this thing, and then I realize that Jeff's back there. So I turn around real quick, and I see him scurrying out from underneath this, trying to get away. And I see the thing tumbling, and, it's almost hit Jeff. And he's like, what the heck? He said, you almost crushed me. And so there it is. So that's got to be 600 pounds that I picked up and threw a good 10 feet, nearly crushing my brother, and threw it all over my shoulder. Okay. So that's what happens. And then, many other times, I was known to throw tools, and, Jeff, like I said, he would, help do stuff. So, like, there'd be times where he would be washing the trucks. So that one of his jobs was washing the trucks, right? So he would be up on the trucks washing them, and I would be working on them. And I'd get mad, and that Go Devil was pretty handy to throw. And I'd grab a hold of that thing, and I'd just throw it as hard as I could at this, telephone pole that was there, right? So this telephone pole is about 20 feet away, and I'd throw that Go Devil at that thing, and the whole pole would just shake. Just rattle, 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 And, of course, scare the crap out of my brother, and he would, like, quit. He would just like, that's it, I'm done, I'm going inside. You're going to freaking kill me. You're going to throw something at me. You're going to pick up something or whatever, and you're going to kill me. I'm going inside. And he would run inside, and he'd tell Mom, Joe's going to kill me. I'm not going back out there. He's going to kill me. I said, he won't mean to, but he's going to kill me. I'm not going back out there. And Mom, she didn't care if the trucks got fixed. So she just, okay, fine, stay inside. Let your brother, I guess, work on it himself. So, oh my God, just nightmares working on those trucks. The trucks were the worst because it's just frustrating, not having the tools and having to do this stuff. And, oh man, I get so frustrated. And like I said, I would just start quivering everywhere, and just I could feel this surge, flowing down my legs and my arms, my heart rate just spiking like crazy, and then just explode. So it was not a safe environment for Jeff. And, we'd do stuff like, I talked about taking the lugs off, and you have to like jump up and down on the pole. And I mentioned before in another video that, he bought this inch drive ratchet, but he bought the extension too short. So it wouldn't, allow the wrench to clear the tires. So you had to kind of put them in there at an angle, right? And you couldn't just, I couldn't like put them on there and then go back and push the pipe down because it would just, twist off. So what I had to do instead was I would put the socket on the lug, and I would hold the head of the wrench, and then I would have my brother, jump up and down on the end of the pole, like the very end, right? Because he wasn't as heavy as my dad, so he would be jumping up and down on that, and I'm basically holding all his weight and the pressure that he's putting on this freaking thing as he's jumping up and down on it, and I'm, pushing and holding up this ratchet to keep it on the lug so that it will turn off. Just nightmare, right? And then, there were other things like that. And then one time, we're at this gas station, and I guess the owner of the gas station let my dad use the area behind the gas station, where the shop, right? There was, a big area behind it that was like a parking lot, but it's all concrete, right? So this giant concrete parking lot, and he allowed us to use the space behind it one day to change the brakes on one of Dad's trucks, right? And my dad had borrowed an impact wrench from somebody, and the garage had an air compressor. So I was like, oh man, this is going to be sweet. This is going to be super easy. And luckily it wasn't one of the International, it was one of the newer trucks that had, regular rims like you would see on pretty much any other truck. You take the lugs off and the tire comes off, and then you have another set, you could take the rest of the bolt off and take the next tire off, right? So you had a lug that went on the front for the first wheel, you take that off, and then the bolt that held the lug for the first tire, now it could come off, right? So you would, take each tire off, and then once you got those two tires off, the whole wheel, so it wasn't just the tire, the tire and the wheel would both come off, right? And that was pretty heavy, and you'd have to lift that off and put it aside, and then lift the next tire and wheel off and put it aside, and then you had to take off the brake drum. So this, big steel drum that was probably like about 10 inches in height, right? And it was probably about, I'd say 2 foot in diameter, right? Maybe not that much. Maybe like 20 inches, maybe. So like 20 inches in diameter and 10 inches deep and about an inch or inch and a half thick, right? Giant steel drum, and that's what the brake pads pushed against, under air pressure to make the truck stop, right? So you had take that drum off too, and then once you did that, now you have these giant brake shoes, and they have these heavy duty springs that keep they keep tension on the brakes so that they will release. So once the air, the piston that drives the brakes apart, right? That's not actually a piston, it's a little spindle with like an S shape. And this S shape would push the brake shoes apart, right? Which would put pressure on the drum. These springs would snap it back down away from the brake drum once you took your foot off the brake, right? And so I'd take these, first thing you had to do is take these springs off, right? And they make special tools to do this, right? Well, I don't have any special tools, so I basically pry it off with the pliers and the pair of pliers and my long screwdriver, right? So I pry those off, pull the brakes off, put the new ones on, and then reassemble it. And now I have to stretch out this spring so that to connect the two brake drums, right? And again, they have special tools that extend the spring so that you can put it back on easy, which we didn't have, which I think cost $50. But we didn't have that. We don't need it because Dad's not doing the work. So, as Joe can handle it, right? So, I was out working on his truck, replacing all the brakes. Well, this is a tri-axle truck. So that's 6 sets of brakes to replace, right? And 6 times 2 or 12 of these, tires and wheels to take off and put back on, right? So this is a lot of work. So I'm out there doing this, and this other guy shows up, right? Another truck driver, and he's got his truck there, right? and he's watching me change the brakes on my dad's truck. And I do all this, change all these brakes in about 40 minutes. Okay? And, I don't have any special tools. Like I said, all I have is a bottle jack, a pair of pliers, a long screwdriver, and then the impact driver that, my dad borrowed, right? So I take all these brakes off, and this guy is watching me do this, and he's like, holy crap. He's like, dang. He said, that boy is strong, ain't he? I said, holy crap. He said, how's he getting those springs on there? Is he just stretching them out by hand? I could hear him talking, to my dad. Is he just stretching them out by hand? And my dad's like, yep, he's all proud of me now, this guy's, praising his strong boy, which I was a man by then. I was like, 21 years old. And he's like, holy crap, he's fast. He said, I take my truck to the garage to get the brakes on him, and I'll sit there and wait 3 or 4 hours sometimes, for them to get that thing off. And he says, it ain't been an hour yet, and he's about done, And so he's, praising my strength and everything, and it's how quick I'm getting this done. He's like, dang. He said, man, I wish I had, I could get the garage to do it that fast. It's like, I was just on my way just now, to get the brakes changed on my truck. And it's like, I guarantee it ain't going to take no 40 damn minutes. And so my dad says, well, just pull it up right here. Said, my boy will do it for you. And he's like, really? And he's like, yeah, just, pull it right up here, and he'll take care of it for you. And he's like, well, let me call my, this guy and tell him to bring the brake shoes over then. And I was like, yeah, okay. So we sit there for a little bit, and I got a chance to get a breather, right? But here in about 20 minutes, this guy shows up with the brake shoes, and so I go to work on this guy's truck, right? Same exact deal. Get everything done. And the guy's like, dang, he says, I really appreciate that, man. You saved me, probably 3 or 4 hours at least, And so he goes into his wallet and pulls out $350. And he starts walking over to me, And he says, here, he says, I got, $350 here. He says, it's worth more than that, but, this is all I got. And he says, let me give you this money. And so he starts walking over to me with this $350. My dad's like, no. Don't worry about that. He don't need no money. He's fine. You don't have to pay. No, you're all right. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you asshole. You didn't do any of the work, And it's like, so I just changed, 9 sets of brakes? No, 12 sets of brakes. Can't even count. 12 sets of brakes in less than 2 hours. And, I get paid nothing. And here's a guy that's wanting to pay me, complaining that he doesn't have enough. I wasn't planning, I was just going to charge it to the thing, but I got $350. I'll give you that. So it's worth more than that. But dang it, I feel bad if I didn't give you anything. And it's like, no, Dad, I just wave it off. No big deal. Bullshit. But anyway, so I mentioned before that sometimes we would, work on these trucks in our yard at the house, right? And the landlord had this giant garage with like, I think 5 or 6 bays for his farming equipment, right? And then there was a 2-car garage that was that was separate from the house, right, where we park our stuff, right, and put our stuff in. And there was 2 light poles. So there was a light pole right next to the 2-car garage. There was another light pole next to the at the end of the other garage. And then there's a light pole that was on the other side of the driveway, kind of halfway between the road and the house, right? And that particular light pole was like my practice pole, right? So I'd get frustrated. I'd go out there and I would beat on it. I'd kick it or, punch it or, hit it with something, right? So that was my pole that I took my frustrations out on. And then this is going to sound unbelievably impossible, but I swear to God, this is what happened. And my mom saw this, so she knows. So I was out there, after having worked on these things and frustrated and angry and whatever. And I ran up to the pole and did like a spinning back kick, right? Like you see in the movies. I'm sure it wasn't that, pretty as the movies. But anyway, and hauled off and kicked that thing as hard as I could. And I hear this crack and the pole falls over. And I'm like, oh shit, what happened? And what had happened is that I had broken the pole off at the ground. Okay, like it had kind of split in half. So it was hanging just by half. And it was tilted over, So I went behind it and tried to push it, just straighten it up. I, grabbed hold of it, yanked it back like that, and kind of got it sort of standing up straight. The best I could anyway, but it was still leaning. And, my mom saw that, and she says, oh my God, Joe. He said, you broke the dang telephone pole. I said, I know, I'm sorry. But that, she didn't care. And then, but the landlord noticed. So he shows up and he's talking to my mom because my dad's off somewhere and I wasn't even there at the time. And he's like, hey, he said, did you guys hit that telephone pole? And my mom says, no. I said, my son did that. And what did he hit? Did he run into it with a car? And he goes, no, he kicked it. And the landlord looks at her like, he kicked it? And she goes, yeah. I said, he jumped up in the air and kicked it real hard and broke it. And this guy says, listen, if you hit it, you hit it. I mean, if, you had to have hit that with a car. What, just tell me that you hit it. It's okay. It's like, it doesn't matter. Why would you tell me that he kicked it? It's like, you're obviously lying to me, lady. There's no way that your son kicked that and broke the pole. And he goes, you back into it with one of them big trucks or something? She's like, no. He said, my son kicked it and it broke. I saw it happen. And she's like, well, would you, like it was already broken or something like that? He's like, no, he broke it. He kicked it. He broke it. And he said, sorry, I don't have any money to, pay you to fix it, but that's what happened. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll replace it. And then he starts going over and checking the other poles because I've, beat up on them too. And he's like, he says, what is he doing out here? He says, you guys running into these things? And it's like, this over by the garage is all beat up. And it's like, it's about ready to, looks like it's about ready to come loose and whatever. And he's like, what is he doing? And it's like, well, my mom's telling him, says, well, he gets mad and then he'll kick it or punch it or whatever. So that's what that is. And he's like, my God. He's like, he says, it looked like you run into this thing like 100 times with a car. And he's like, no, no. Hey, I promise you, we have not hit that with the cars or the trucks or nothing. And he's like, you can tell me it doesn't really matter. You can tell me the truth. And she's like, I'm telling you the truth. My son did that, but it was just so unbelievable. But I broke a telephone pole nearly completely off, at the ground by kicking it, by being so mad and kicking the thing. And the other pole was pretty beat up too. But I think that's enough. That sounds like a complete fabrication. I'm aware of that. Okay. I didn't believe it either when I broke it. I was like, this is impossible. Maybe it was termites or something. And that's when me and my mom were convinced that it was, termites had got into it and weakened it, and then I kicked it and broke it. Well, that's what she told the landlords. It's like, well, maybe the termites, ate it up. And he goes, no termites ate that thing. It does creosote poles. He said, there's no insects or anything. There was nothing wrong with that pole. You just hit it with your car and broke it. It's okay. Just say, tell me you hit it with the car or one of those big trucks. He says, I know that's what you did. He says, why are you lying to me? And she's like, I promise you, Mr. Farkas, we did not hit that with no trucks. That was my son. And he's like, well, there's no freaking way that pole was nothing wrong with it. It's not like rotted or anything. He says, there's no way he can do that. And I was like, well, he did. I saw him do it. Nobody else hit that pole. It wasn't broken before. It was perfectly standing straight. He kicked it and it fell over. It almost fell all the way over. And then he pushed it back up. And he's like, well, I'm going to have to come out here and replace all these dang poles now. And tell your boy to leave the dang poles alone. If that's what's really happening, tell him not to hit him anymore. He's like, okay, I'll tell him. So I know it sounds crazy, but that's what happened. I don't know what, that's the truth of it. So back in those days, when I would get that adrenaline rush, stuff would break, things would go flying, and so would Jeff. He would be taking off to go inside because he just knew for sure that I was going to kill him, and he would tell me, he says, like, you don't know how strong you are, He says, I watch you when you're doing this stuff, and he says, I know how strong you are. He says, you don't know how strong you are, and he says, and you think that you're, being gentle, He said, but you're not. He said, you grab a hold of me, and it feels like you're going to break my arm. He says, you grip me so hard. And it's like, I know you're just, grabbing a hold of me. You're not trying to hurt me. He said, but it feels like you're going to break my arm when you grab a hold of me. When you get mad like that, he says, you don't know your own strength. And it said, you're going to kill me. So I don't want to work with you. It's not, I don't want to work on these trucks. He said, but that's not the reason. He says, but I'm afraid. He says, you're going to kill me. He says, I know that you could, just grab a hold of me and just twist me in half without even thinking about it. He said, you'd be real sorry, but I would already be dead. And it's like, I don't want to die. So when you get mad, I'm leaving. I'm going inside. I don't want to be anywhere near you. I don't want you to grab a hold of me. I don't want you to touch me. I don't want you to throw anything at me. I'm leaving. So Papaw used to be really strong, and I probably just the adrenaline. You hear stories about people, getting under adrenaline and doing, all kinds of crazy things, turning over cars and stuff. So I guess that's true because it would happen to me all the time. This was a pretty regular thing. But it was always over rage, just uncontrollable, rage. And then the shaking and then the throwing would start happening. So that's stories of Papaw's super strength. Until next time.